Ready to get started? Got a few more people have joined. Okay, let's go on and get started because I know we're about 3 minutes over our start time. This is Robert Gerard. I'm actually president of Credence Code International. We are joining us. Thank you for joining us today on our Ask Me Anything podcast. I wanted to let everyone know that Tim Vasko, who normally hosts this call, is actually off today. He's actually talking to some investors and will be traveling. So Jay Goff, Director of Business Development, has graciously agreed to answer all these questions and handle anything that you may have. We're going to strictly focus on investor questions today because Jay does handle the investor side. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to you, Jay, and introduce yourself and give us a brief overview. Also joining us, just so you know, is Andrew Stewart, who heads up our customer engagement, who will also be asking us some questions as well. All right, Jay, I'm going to let you start off.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Robert. I appreciate the introduction, and welcome everyone to our weekly Ask Me Anything series. Today's focus is going to be on the investment side of things, as Robert said, so that's going to be the main focus of our questions. If you have technical questions, I may give a brief reply, or I may ask you to wait and ask at the next week's meeting when Tim will be on. So a lot of things have happened this week. I want to give you a brief update before I get started. We're just signing an agreement with a digital marketing agency to start getting the word out about Blockcerts and Credence Code and our offering. And actually what they're doing is working with us to prepare for our initial token offering. So that's an exciting event. We'll be announcing that early next week after they've been formally engaged. But that's a big plus for our team. And we've had several discussions with major use cases over the last week. All those are proceeding forward, and it looks like we have a number of what I think will be very high-profile use cases that we'll be able to tell you about in the near future. That being said, I'm ready for questions.
Okay, well, great. Jay, I know that we've announced some interesting things that is on everyone's mind, and I've got one here from Dave. Why have we gone from 5 cents to a 10-cent change, which basically doubles the price of our tokens going forward?
Well, that's a great question, Dave. And the answer to that is pretty simple. It's a supply and demand question. Right now, between the use cases and the investor interest, we're rapidly burning through a number of tokens. And it's important to us as conservative business operatives that we keep the price even with demand. So as we see demand increasing, we thought it was only fair to raise the price of the tokens. That will give our early investors, the ones who get in at the 5-cent range, a chance to see an increase in the value of their token. And it also provides us with greater value for the tokens. I think it kind of reflects the market value we're seeing right now in the market.
Okay, great. Jay, another question that actually Jim just posted. He says, if we were to invest with Blockcerts by purchasing X number of tokens, walk us through how we can generate ongoing revenue and how the payout works. So basically, we're kind of talk about the offering itself and kind of walk us through all of that and how that works and how a investor can make money off of the tokens.
Sure, Jim. Happy to answer that. The first thing that I need to make clear is your investment is actually with Credence Code Technologies because that's the pre-sale offering that's in place. We're a U.S. corporation. The tokens are actually minted and run by Blockcerts International. And so they are Blockcerts tokens, but through our agreement with Blockcerts as the exclusive distributor for North America, credence code is the company that you're actually investing with. So that's number one. Number two, you're asking about how a token holder will be able in the future, once they actually have their tokens, see revenue from inside the token. And it's really pretty simple. Ours are true utility tokens, Jim. And as we've explained in previous Ask Me Anything webinars, those tokens are used to enable smart contracts and transaction streaming. What that means is you take a token and you open up a smart contract and you perform a certain transaction. It could be any type of business transaction, but the transaction is now done through software instead of through paper. So you're saving courier fees, FedEx fees, notary public fees, all that kind of stuff is being saved by using smart contracts on the blockchain, which is where I think the future of business is headed. So as a contract is being used in the token, it's generating computational needs, and those computational needs need to be offset by a small pricing mechanism. So we call that ink. And ink is just simply a mechanism whereby the more complex a transaction is, the more the contract is going to take up computational space, the more quote unquote ink will be used. That will determine the amount of money that is paid to the computational group for performing all the operations. But at the same time, a portion of that will go to the token owner. So if you think about the Apple App Store, and developers develop apps on the system, when an app is used out of the App Store, a fee is generated. Part of that goes to Apple, and part of that goes to the developer. In the same case, any developer fees or ink or any other revenue generation mechanism within the token, a portion of that will go to the token owner. So by being a token owner, you're actually owning an asset that may appreciate or, in some cases depreciate over time. We expect them to depreciate as usage goes up. So you'll own an underlying asset that's appreciating, and at the same time, you're generating revenue out of that asset. So my analogy is an apartment building. If I buy an apartment building, I actually own an asset that's going to go up in value over time as the landing and building become more valuable. But at the same time, I'm charging rent to my tenants, and I'm deriving a revenue stream from that. That's kind of where we see the Blockcerts tokens giving value in two ways, both through the intrinsic value of the token itself going up as time goes on, through supply and demand, and also through the revenue generating capacity.
Okay, Jay, thank you for that explanation. If there's any follow-up questions, just post them there in the Q&A for us. Andrew, I'm sure you've got some questions as well.
Sure I do. I've got a question that James sent in, and it's basically, how do I know if I'm an accredited investor or not?
Well, James, there are some regulations that we have to follow by doing our offering. So maybe to answer your question more accurately, I should probably describe a little bit about the offering itself. A lot of companies in the blockchain world have raised tons of money by doing what we call ICOs, or initial coin offerings. And they can be anything from just a white paper with a bunch of marketing and hype, where they raise, in some cases, hundreds of millions of dollars. And that may or may not be a good investment for the people who are buying the tokens. Out of the all the token offerings or coin offerings that were done, I believe in 2016, only about half of those businesses were actually operating in 2017. So there's your kind of crapshoot of the ICO industry. So you're seeing the regulators looking at this and saying, wait a second, there's an opportunity for people to go in and scam people to buy coins that are never going to be of any value. So the SEC has actually come after some of these companies and said, hey, you need to stop doing your ICO. You need to return the money to the initial investors. So they're saying that initial coin offerings are basically a security. So we took a look at this last year when we were preparing to do our ICO, and we said, well, what can we do to make sure we're totally compliant with regulations, especially in the United States, since we're a US corporation? And what we decided to do was take a few extra steps beyond what most people were doing. So the first thing that came out of this whole regulatory atmosphere was what was called a simple agreement for future tokens. So a SAFT is basically a document that says, I'm going to give you money today, and when you do your ICO, I'm going to get my tokens. So it's an agreement for future tokens. So we took that model and we incorporated it into what's called a private placement memorandum, which is a typical risk disclosure document that companies who file exemptions with the SEC have to provide. So any kind of company that's raising money should be providing some kind of risk disclosure document if they're selling a security, which is what the regulators consider coin offerings to be today. So what we did is we wrapped the simple agreement for future tokens inside a private placement memorandum. So we were doubly protecting ourselves and our token investors by following the regulations as we see the SEC. We're actually going the extra mile to make sure we're totally compliant. We did conduct what's called a 506C offering, which is a general solicitation, which means we can tell anybody that we want to. We can even advertise that we're offering the security. But in order to comply with that regulation, we can only take money today in the pre-sale from accredited investors. So to get to your question, James, taking a long way around, but I wanted to kind of frame it. An accredited investor is an individual with $1 million in net assets, net worth, excluding their principal residence, or an income of $200,000 a year, or a couple, a man and wife or a husband and wife, with a combined income of $300,000 a year. So it's either a net worth requirement or an income requirement, and that income has to have been for the last 2 years, and there has to be a reasonable expectation that it will continue for the next year. And so to become an accredited investor, you have to fall into those guidelines. If you're not an accredited investor, then I suggest that you still stay in touch with us, register for what we're doing on our website, because we can put you on our ICO newsletter, and when we do the ICO, even unaccredited investors will be able to buy our tokens at that time.
Okay, thank you. I've got a follow-up question from that, and then we'll get to Jim's question again. But from Ian, he was saying, I've looked at some of the accreditation type websites, and I don't really want to give all my personal financial information to a total stranger. Is there another way?
Yes. What we did is we don't want to see your personal information either, Ian. Believe me. The last thing we want to get into is privacy issues. So what we did is we contracted with a company called InvestReady that does these third-party accreditations. And these people are bonded, they're insured. You can trust that if you send something to them, it goes through a secure portal. It doesn't go through regular email. And they'll take care of all your privacy issues. In addition to that, a lot of times accredited investors will simply have their attorney or their CPA firm or say a wealth management person, somebody who's a trusted fiduciary, to write a letter stating that you're an accredited investor, and they simply send that letter in. That's acceptable documentation. What the SEC is really looking for is, let's make sure that the people who invest in early stage private placement memorandums don't need the money that they're investing, because in traditional private equity, private placements, you're buying a private stock in a company that may never go public and may never be sold, and you may never see your money back. We think with our offering, the fact that we're going to be doing an initial token offering in the next several months, hopefully less, we'll be able to see liquidity much quicker than you can through a traditional private placement. But at the same time, we can only take money before we do the ITO from accredited investors. So we need to make sure that you fit all the requirements. Plus, another note, An accredited investor usually sees a lot of private placement memorandums. So when they see a 50-page document telling you thousands of ways you can lose all your money, they're not worried. They understand the risks involved in getting involved in an early stage venture. A lot of people, when they see their first private placement memorandum, go, holy smokes, only a crazy person would invest. But the people who have seen these over and over again realize that that's basically standard boilerplate. It's a risk. Any investment is a risk, but this is a risk that requires a high level of documentation, and we have all that.
Okay, thank you. Bob, I think there's a question there from Jim again.
Okay. Yes, Jim had asked, he says, as a crypto, he's basically talking about how cryptocurrency is going through its bear market now. He says, how will it affect the Blockcerts token on the initial offering to the marketplace?
So I think, Jim, what you're getting to is the volatility in the markets and cryptocurrency and utility tokens. And that's one of the things that I want to get across to everybody today is really what we're offering, even though it's classified as a security, it's really a utility token. People are going to be able to use these tokens to conduct their business over the blockchain. This is a whole new paradigm. It's brand new. I think we're one of the leaders in the field because we do have the infrastructure ready to enable smart contracts and get businesses on the blockchain very quickly. And these are our use cases that I'm talking about now. But in order to avoid the kind of volatility you see in the cryptocurrency market, we're not really trying to get a bunch of cryptocurrency investors into our tokens. We're trying to get people into our tokens who are either strategic partners, like large use cases, or investors who see the value of holding these tokens over the long term and basically renting them out, similar to my analogy on the apartments, renting their tokens to other businesses so that they can use the tokens. And as your token price goes up over time, but in hopefully a steady manner, not one of these Bitcoin things where it goes up, goes down, get the roller coaster heebie-jeebies, I think we can create a nice stable demand. And then we have some other mechanisms in place internally that we're going to have in our back pocket in case we start seeing crazy price swings. It's kind of like having a poison pill or something like that for shorting stock shorters. We want to make sure that if the demand for our token starts going up significantly and it gets more expensive to use our tokens than it does to go back to the traditional way of doing business, we have a mechanism in place to alleviate the pressure on that demand. And believe me, it will be to the benefit of our current token holders. If we won't be diluting their position, we'll actually be adding value.
Great, thank you. I did see another follow-up on your discussion earlier about a accredited investor, and that was if I'm a foreign investor, what other items do we need to present or be executed, and is there any other regulatory requirements that are needed in order to be approved as an investor?
Basically, we have a private placement memorandum that I described before that every investor needs to sign no matter where in the world you're investing from. And then we also have a supplement to that, which is a foreign purchaser addendum. And basically, that's just an additional form. It does require a little more information so that we know who you are. And then you still have to run through the Invest Ready application. And if you have questions on your particular location, Invest Ready has a great resource on their site that we can send you to that will tell you exactly what in your country may be required if you want to get involved in a U.S. offering. But basically, yes, there are going to be requirements no matter where you are in the world, and we want to make sure that we comply with every single country.
Excellent.
Okay, great. Andrew, you got any more questions?
I don't at this time. Any more
Okay.
from Jim or Rick or Roger?
Well, I did have one from Steve. He's asking is what kind of use cases do we have currently or that we're currently working on? If you can discuss that more.
Yeah, so I did mention use cases, didn't I, Robert? The use case area is very fruitful for us right now. And the reason is, if you look at most of the tokens that are out there that claim to be utility tokens, they say that they're focused on a particular niche like financial technologies or real estate. And our position at Blockcerts is we're basically industry agnostic. You know, a business transaction is a business transaction. Yes, a pharmaceutical transaction is going to be different from a real estate transaction, but they're both contracts or agreements between parties that need to be fulfilled. So we believe that our smart contracts can be tailored to any type of industry. So if you look at the current use case people we're talking to, we have groups that include education, immigration, financial technologies, real estate, mortgages, healthcare, pharmaceutical, and entertainment. And those are broad categories, I know. But like I say, we're industry agnostic. If you have two people that are agreeing to do something, we can do it over the blockchain with Blockcerts.
Okay, great. I did get one from Rick, and he was asking, what is the latest on the ETA on the ICO, given some of the most recent developments with use cases?
Yeah, we are going to be getting to the ITO as soon as we can. We know that our early stage investors who have invested at the 5-cent offering would love to see us go out to the market. The most important thing on ITO timing is there has to be a confluence of events so that you can maximize the value to your token holders. So we want to make sure, like I say, we just engaged the digital marketing agency, so they're going to start getting the word out about us and building our community so that people understand who we are and what we stand for and what we're doing. That'll take a little bit of time to build that out. We want to get a couple of our use cases established so we can have some poster children for the ITO so that people can see that this is a utility token, that it is working today in the market, things like that. And probably most importantly, we still have to follow securities regulations in the United States. And that means that we're going to move from the current offering we have, which is a 506C, and I hate to use nomenclature, but that's basically what it's classified as. And we're going to go to what's called a Regulation A or Regulation A+, which is a different offering. It's similar, but it requires us to do another registration with the SEC, and that takes about 90 days. What we'll be doing is during that registration period, we can go ahead and test the waters. So that's not precluding us from doing our ITO internationally, because the ITO will actually be performed by Blockcerts, which is an international company headquartered outside the United States. So if we do our ITO in, say, late April, May, we can go ahead and take reservations or indications of interest from U.S. investors. We just can't sell them the tokens until our registration has been processed and we're cleared, but those will be reserved for those U.S. investors. Sorry for the murky answer, but this is it's a whole new landscape, and we're still navigating. The rules change every day. I just saw a couple of news items today on securities regulations that are being enforced, and in fact, Regulation A just went from a $50 million total offering. The Senate, I guess, has approved a $75 million offering now for Regulation A. It still has to pass the House and get signed, but that's an indication of where the regulators are heading.
Yes, so they're opening things up.
To make a long answer short, we're still targeting the April-May timeframe, most likely May.
Okay. Now, Jim did have another question, and this is a little bit of a technical question, but we've actually answered it before. So I'll let you decide whether you want to answer it or not. But it's what's the difference in proof of work versus proof of stake? And is proof of stake blockchain, we believe proof of work will become obsolete over time?
Well, we do. At least that's my personal opinion. I know that Tim, our chairman, shares that with me. If you look at Bitcoin, that's a proof of work operation. Basically what it's saying is you have to prove your work by doing this elaborate, crazy algorithm question and getting the answer right before all the thousands of people on the block are trying to prove it. It requires massive amounts of computing power to get these algorithms fixed and finished and get your block up. So you get rewarded for doing that. That's how the blockchain works, is you have a number of computers that are all sharing the ledger, but how do you get consensus? How do you agree that all the terms in that block are ready to go on the blockchain? Right now it's called proof of work. I think the whole industry will eventually be going to more of a proof of stake, and that will eliminate the need for computing power. And basically what it will do is it'll say, you got to have some skin in the game to be part of this consensus group, and you'll be rewarded for providing your consensus. The blocks will be awarded to people who have the most skin in the game, and it'll be a totally different situation. So these are still unfolding things. I think proof of work was the beginning. Proof of stake is the next step. And I think there will probably be something that nobody's even dreamed of that'll be the third step that'll make it even more fluid. And as long as we keep that security in place on the cryptographic side, and we keep people benefiting from being part of blockchains, I think that's where you'll see the future. So we're a proof of stake blockchain, and I think that is the future for now. And that was a technical question, and I'm very offended.
So to go along with that technical question, proof of work or proof of stake, which is faster in giving the results?
Well, proof of stake is going to be, we believe, much faster. This is still an ongoing thing, but right now, Bitcoin, the number of transactions they can do is very low compared to Visa. They're thousands of times faster than Bitcoin or even Ethereum today. Ethereum is actually moving towards a proof of stake. They've already stated that they want to move to a proof of stake model. So I think what you're going to see is even beyond proof of stake, proof of work, I think our system with a hybrid of a private blockchain that can process transactions very, very rapidly, combined with a proof of stake system and being able to tie your private blockchain tokens to a public blockchain at certain times, like if you want to provide public transparency to auditors, or you want to close out your token and sync it to the public blockchain, that's where the future will be headed. I think you'll see a lot of the business transactions being done over private blockchains, and then the block attached to a public blockchain at a certain point in time.
Great, and I agree with you. I agree. Andrew, how about you? Do you have any more questions that you have over there?
No, I'm kind of out of questions here. I'm sure there's lots more in various other topics, but for specific to investing, that's all I have for today.
Well, great. I hope we're able to answer a lot of the questions that are on people's minds. And of course, we are always available. So if individual investors have a question, it's very easy. You can just go on to our any of our websites, Blockcerts or Credence Code, and we actually have a chat button now on the website that you can go to and ask a question, and we'll be happy to answer it. We usually have that manned 24/7. So you ask a question, we'll have the answer. It may not be the one you want, but it'll be the one we give.
Exactly. So if no one else has any questions and stuff, then I do want to let you know that we will be, this is recorded. We will be uploading it into our podcast site. And if you wish to have a copy of this particular recording, we'll be happy to do it. I know, Jim, you've already asked for one. So we'll get one out to you, but they'll also be posted on our site, and you'll be able to get them through blockcerts.com, correct,
Yes.
Jay?
Yep. Well, thanks, everybody. It's been great.
Okay. Thank you very much. Have a great day.